There are moments in life that pass by unnoticed, until they come back to save you. For Barron Trump, it wasn't the politics or the pressure that shaped him. It was a man who never asked for recognition, never sought the spotlight, and yet changed everything. The applause was polite, but not overwhelming. It wasn't a campaign rally, not a press conference, and certainly not a presidential address. This was something quieter, more intimate, and far more human. Barron Trump entered the studio not as a political figure, not as a headline, but simply as a young man. Tall, composed, and wrapped in the familiar armor of calm detachment that the world had come to associate with him. His expression was unreadable, his suit immaculate, his eyes scanning the room not with arrogance, but with something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or longing. The host greeted him with warmth, but a respectful distance, sensing the layers he would need to gently unfold. Barron smiled faintly as he sat down, but the kind of smile that barely made it to the eyes. The audience sensed it. The kind of smile worn by someone who has learned too young how to carry the weight of other people's expectations. "Thank you for being here today," the host said, his voice low, measured. "It means more than you know." Barron nodded once. "Glad to be here," he replied. But the words hung in the air a little longer than they should have, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. What the world didn't know was that this wasn't just another interview, not for Barron. Today wasn't about achievements, family legacy, or future ambitions. It was about memory, a memory long buried that had quietly shaped everything he had become. We remember those who changed the world, but what about those who changed our world? The questions at first were surface level. Conversations about school, public appearances, his love of technology and languages. He answered each with poised diplomacy, trained calm. But then the host leaned forward, voice softening. "There's something different we want to talk about today," he said. "Someone who shaped you, long before the world even noticed your name." For a moment, Barron blinked. Just once, but it was enough to betray the shift inside him. His jaw tightened and his gaze fell to the floor. There was a long pause, heavy and deliberate. "When I was 14, he began, his voice lower now, "I had a hard time being seen, not by cameras, but by people." He exhaled slowly, the kind of breath you take before speaking a truth that still stings. "There was a man at my school, not a teacher, not a counselor, just a janitor. His name was Mr. Jenkins." The audience leaned in. The air changed. "He didn't teach math, he didn't give grades, he didn't wear a tie, but every time I felt like I was disappearing, he found a way to remind me I was still here." Barron swallowed hard. He never said much, just showed up. Sometimes with a broom, sometimes with a quiet nod. But he saw things that even I didn't know how to name. He shifted in his seat, the mask beginning to crack. "I used to sit in the hallway during lunch, not with the other kids, not because I was special, but because I didn't know where I belonged." A small silence followed. "And one day," Barron continued, voice growing thinner, "he sat down next to me, didn't ask questions, didn't pretend to fix anything. He just placed a napkin next to me, with a note." The audience stilled. "It said, 'You don't have to be loud to be heard.' Sometimes the quietest words carry the loudest echoes." Barron's fingers curled slightly, as if still holding that napkin years later. "I didn't throw it away," he said. "I folded it, carried it in my wallet for years. When everything felt like too much, the cameras, the whispers, the expectations, I'd open it, just to remember that someone once saw me without all the noise." His voice grew softer. "That year was hard. People think being in the spotlight makes you invincible. But the truth is, it just makes your flaws more visible. I I was struggling with reading, with pressure, with being a Trump, but not really being me. He looked up, eyes glassy but holding. Mr. Jenkins didn't ask me to be anything. He just reminded me that I already was. The host stayed silent, letting the words breathe. "I never thanked him," Barron whispered. "I don't even know if he knew how much it meant. It was just a napkin to him, but to me, it was a life raft." The audience was still, not frozen, just reverent. "That was the moment I stopped trying to disappear," Barron continued. "I didn't suddenly find confidence, but I found something better. I found worth." The host leaned back, visibly moved. Then, without changing tone, he said, "What if I told you that napkin wasn't the only thing saved that day?" Barron blinked. "What do you mean?" But the host only smiled gently and turned his head toward the back row of the studio. And then the past walked into the room, not as a memory, but as a man. The lights dimmed. A gentle shift in spotlight cast a soft glow over the final row of the audience. A figure sat there, unmoving, older, still. Barron followed the host's gaze slowly, and the moment his eyes landed on that silhouette, everything inside him seemed to still. His breath hitched, his shoulders locked. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because sometimes presence says more than names. The audience, sensing something sacred, did not cheer. They simply watched. The figure in the final row didn't stand, didn't wave. He just sat there, watching, like he always had. Barron's lips parted slightly. His expression was unreadable, part disbelief, part aching hope. He blinked twice, but the tears didn't fall, not yet. The host gave space, not pressing forward, not narrating the moment, just letting it unfold like a forgotten photograph, being found in a drawer you didn't know existed. And for a long stretch of time, no one moved. Then quietly, the host said, "Would you tell us who he was to you, Barron?" Barron's voice cracked slightly. "He was the first person who didn't try to fix me. He just let me be enough." He turned fully to face the back row. "And now he's here. After all these years." He paused, voice trembling. "Why?" Barron's eyes didn't leave the back row. He sat forward slightly, his posture no longer composed but curious, vulnerable. Something about that still figure had undone the layers he'd spent years building. The host's voice softened. "Can you take us back, Barron, to that time, before the name, before the headlines? Who were you really?" For the first time that day, Barron hesitated, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he knew exactly what it cost to say it. "I was a scared kid," he said, eyes falling to his hands. "Smart, maybe, but lost. I didn't feel like I fit anywhere. At school, I was the odd one out. At home, the world was watching. But no one really saw me." He took a breath, slow and measured. "I struggled with reading, with anxiety. I didn't want anyone to know, especially not my parents, so I kept quiet. I tried to disappear between the cracks. The room was so quiet, you could hear the soft buzz of the studio lights. The audience didn't move, not because they were frozen, but because they were listening with more than just ears. Mr. Jenkins, he didn't try to fix me. He didn't treat me like I was broken. He just showed up. When I sat alone, he'd pass by. He never made it a big deal. But somehow, he made me feel seen." A pause. That year, my world was falling apart. Rumors, bullies, expectations I didn't understand. And one afternoon, I stayed after school, pretending to wait for a ride that wasn't coming. His voice wavered. He sat down next to me, placed an old apple juice box on the bench and said, "You don't need to explain why you're here. You just need to know that you are." Barron smiled faintly, the kind that hides tears. No one had ever said that to me before. The host leaned back, visibly moved. He didn't speak. He just allowed Barron's words to live in the air a little longer. Then, as if almost reluctant, he reached for something beneath his desk. "We received something earlier today," he said quietly. Didn't know what it meant at the time. "But now, I think this belongs to you." He handed Barron a plain cream-colored envelope. The edges were worn, the handwriting precise but soft. Familiar. Barron took it slowly. The moment his eyes met the ink, his breath caught. This is his handwriting," he whispered. He opened it carefully, like unfolding a piece of the past. Inside, a single note, a sentence that read, "Your silence gave you power. Never forget that." Barron's hands trembled slightly. The note wasn't long, but it carried weight. Decades of unspoken meaning, recognition, grace. The host didn't interrupt. Barron pressed the paper to his chest. "I didn't know he remembered me. I didn't think I mattered that much." The host took a slow breath. "What if I told you that Mr. Jenkins was going through something too?" Barron looked up. "What do you mean?" The host's tone dropped an octave. "That same year he lost his son. A quiet tragedy. One he didn't talk about. But we found a note from the school counselor. Mr. Jenkins never took time off. He came to work every day. And he poured himself into the halls, into the silence, into you." The weight of that truth landed like thunder. Barron sat back in his chair, stunned. "I never knew." "He didn't want you to," the host said gently, "because real mentors don't ask for your thanks. They just make sure you survive." The studio was silent once again. But this time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of everything that had never been said. "I thought he was just a kind man," Barron said, "but he was healing, and somehow helping me helped him." The host nodded. "That's what connection is. Two broken people choosing not to let each other fall." Then, almost as if the universe wasn't finished yet, Mr. Jenkins stood up. The audience turned slowly, a rustle of movement, but still no words. He walked down the aisle, his steps steady but weathered. And when he reached the stage, he didn't speak. He simply handed Barron a bundle of old brown paper tied with twine. Barron took it with reverence. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The title read, "When I Grow Up." Barron gasped. This was my first essay." He unfolded it with trembling hands and began to read aloud. "I want to be someone who understands people, even when they can't speak. I don't think I'll be famous. I just want to make people feel less alone." He stopped, overwhelmed. Mr. Jenkins finally spoke, his voice soft and worn. "You wrote that. You didn't remember it, but I did. Because it wasn't just an assignment. It was who you already were." Barron looked at him, eyes shining. "I thought I was invisible." "You weren't," Mr. Jenkins replied. "You were just quiet. And sometimes quiet people carry the loudest truths." The studio didn't erupt into applause. It didn't need to. What echoed in that room wasn't noise. It was remembrance, and the return of a moment long overdue. Barron sat with the essay still in his hands, the paper slightly trembling as if it held the heartbeat of a younger self. He looked at Mr. Jenkins, then out into the studio where everyone remained hushed, not with silence, but with awe. "Fame didn't shape me," Barron said slowly. "This man did. When I didn't believe in who I was, he believed for me." The host leaned forward, his voice low. "Do you think you'd be here, who you are today, if it weren't for him?" Barron didn't hesitate. "No, I don't." He turned again to the man beside him. "You gave me something no one else ever did. You gave me me." Mr. Jenkins lowered his eyes humbly, but Barron wasn't finished. Every time I speak with purpose, every time I listen more than I talk, every time I remember that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. It's because of what you showed me." Tears touched the edges of his voice, but he didn't wipe them away. "You made me believe I could be more than my last name, that I could be someone who made others feel less alone. And you did it by being there, quietly, consistently." The studio remained breathless. Not one person looked away. Because some moments don't need to be explained. They just need to be witnessed. The host looked gently at Barron. "If you could look into his eyes right now," he said, "what would you want him to see?" Barron's answer came without pause. That he mattered. That every moment he spent believing in a boy who sat alone in the hallway made a difference beyond what he could ever know. He folded the essay carefully and held it to his heart. "You were the first person who made me feel seen, not for who I could be, not for who I came from, but for who I was, right there." He turned back to Mr. Jenkins. "I never forgot that, not for a second." The camera cut briefly to the audience, some with hands clasped, some wiping away tears. But no one clapped, because reverence doesn't require sound. Then the host asked one final question. "If he stood now and walked to you, what would you do?" Barron smiled, the kind that breaks and heals at the same time. "I'd hug him and I'd say, 'Every good thing I've ever done, every act of kindness I've ever shown, started with you, with a napkin, with a note, with a presence that never asked to be seen, but changed me forever.'" And slowly, Mr. Jenkins stood. He walked to Barron. No rush, no spotlight, just two souls meeting again where one story ended, and another finally began. They embraced, not like teacher and student, but like something deeper, like a memory finding its way home. The host turned to the camera. His voice was soft, but it carried weight. How many of us are walking around with unspoken thank yous in our hearts, gratitude waiting for the right moment to be said? He paused. If today you had the chance to thank the one person who helped you through your silence, would you take it? Barron stood beside Mr. Jenkins, both men quiet. "You don't have to be famous to matter," the host continued. "You just have to show up and be the voice someone else remembers when the world grows quiet." The screen faded to black. Then came one final sentence. "Sometimes the ones who clean the halls leave the clearest paths behind."